I noticed a bruise on my daughter's arm. During family dinner, I asked in front of her husband, "What happened to you?" She forced a smile and said she had fallen. When I stared at him, he said, "What's it to you?" I simply stood up and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this and comment the city you're watching from. I'm Felix, and at 62 years old, I thought I'd seen everything. 28 years as a police officer will do that to you. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what I noticed on that Thursday evening at my daughter's dining room table. Ember had invited me over for dinner, something that had become increasingly rare since she married Derek 3 years ago. I should have been happy about the invitation, but there was something in her voice when she called that made my chest tighten. That subtle tremor that every father learns to recognize, the one that says your child is trying too hard to sound normal. I arrived at their suburban home around 6:30, carrying a bottle of wine and hoping for a peaceful evening with my only child. The house always felt cold to me, despite Derek's expensive renovations. Everything was perfectly arranged, sterile almost, like a showroom rather than a home where people actually lived and laughed. Ember greeted me at the door with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She looked thinner than when I'd seen her last month. Her usual vibrant energy dimmed somehow. But it was Derek's immediate appearance behind her that set my nerves on edge. "Felix," he said, not bothering with warmth or even basic courtesy, "punctual as always." I nodded, swallowing the dozen responses that came to mind. For Ember's sake, I'd learned to bite my tongue around her husband. But every instinct I'd developed over nearly 3 decades of law enforcement screamed that something was wrong with Derek Matthews. Dinner started normally enough. We talked about my retirement, about Ember's work at the marketing firm, about safe, superficial topics that filled the silence without saying anything meaningful. But I was watching. Old habits die hard, and I'd spent too many years observing people to miss the signs. Ember kept tugging at her sleeves, pulling them down past her wrists. She barely touched her food, pushing it around her plate instead of eating. And every time Derek spoke, she would glance at him first before responding, like she was seeking permission for her own thoughts. It was when she reached for the water pitcher that I saw it. The sleeve of her cream-colored blouse slid up just enough to reveal her forearm, and there it was, a bruise. Not the kind you get from bumping into furniture or having an accident. This was deliberate, the kind that comes from someone gripping too hard, fingers pressing deep enough to leave their mark on pale skin. My blood went cold. In that instant, I was transported back 25 years to domestic disturbance calls, to women who wore long sleeves in summer and learned to flinch at sudden movements. I'd seen that exact bruise pattern hundreds of times, and it never meant anything good. I set down my fork carefully, keeping my voice level. "Ember, what happened to your arm?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Derek's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing as he followed my gaze to where Ember was now desperately trying to pull her sleeve back down. He forced a laugh, but it came out brittle and hollow. "Oh, this? I fell yesterday when I was bringing groceries in from the car. You know how clumsy I can be, Dad. Just lost my balance and hit the concrete step." The lie rolled off her tongue too easily, too practiced. This wasn't the first time she'd had to explain away suspicious injuries. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but I kept my expression neutral. "That must have been quite a fall," I said quietly, my eyes never leaving her face. Before she could respond, Derek leaned forward, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "What exactly do you think you're implying here, Felix?" I turned to look at him, really look at him. Derek was 34, 10 years younger than Ember, with the kind of artificial charm that fooled a lot of people, but had never fooled me. He had pale blue eyes that never seemed to hold any genuine warmth, and a smile that appeared and disappeared like a switch being flipped. "I'm not implying anything," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm asking my daughter about an injury." Derek's jaw tightened. "Well, she answered you. She fell. Case closed." He emphasized the words like he was talking to a child, condescension dripping from every syllable. The silence that followed felt dangerous. Ember was staring at her plate, her shoulders hunched like she was trying to disappear into herself. Derek was watching me with barely concealed hostility, daring me to push further. That's when I stood up, not quickly, not dramatically. Just a slow, deliberate movement that made both of them look at me with sudden attention. I walked to the kitchen, my footsteps echoing in the uncomfortable quiet. I knew exactly what I was looking for. 3 months ago, when Derek had been bragging about his new security system, he'd mentioned keeping important documents in the kitchen drawer. I'd filed that information away without knowing why. My hand closed around what I was looking for, and I walked back to the dining room with measured steps. Derek was whispering something urgent to Ember, but stopped when he saw me return. His eyes immediately went to what I was holding, a small digital recorder, the kind I used to carry for interviews during my police days. "What the hell is that?" Derek demanded, his voice rising. I set the recorder on the table between us, my finger hovering over the record button. "Insurance," I said simply. The words seemed to suck all the air out of the room. Derek's face had gone white, and Ember was looking between us with growing panic. "Dad, what are you doing?" she whispered. I looked at my daughter, this beautiful, intelligent woman who had somehow learned to make herself small and apologetic in her own home. The daughter who used to challenge me on everything, who had opinions about politics and books and life. The daughter who had never, not once in 44 years, been clumsy enough to bruise herself that badly from a simple fall. "I'm doing what I should have done a long time ago," I said quietly. Derek shot to his feet, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "You have no right to come into my house and make accusations." "You're absolutely right," I agreed, my voice calm as still water. "This is your house, but she's my daughter, and that bruise on her arm, that's not from falling down concrete steps." The words hung between us like a challenge. Derek's hands were clenched into fists at his sides, his face flushed with anger. But it was the look in his eyes that told me everything I needed to know. Not surprise, not confusion, but calculation. He was trying to figure out how much I knew and how much trouble he was in. Ember made a small sound, almost like a whimper, and my heart broke a little more. I picked up the recorder and slipped it back into my pocket. "I think dinner's over," I said. As I headed for the door, Derek's voice followed me, low and menacing. "Stay out of our business, old man. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into." I paused at the threshold, looking back at him over my shoulder. "No, Derek, you have no idea what you've gotten yourself into." The drive home felt like it took hours instead of 20 minutes. My hands were shaking slightly as I gripped the steering wheel, adrenaline and fury warring in my chest. But underneath it all was something colder, more purposeful. I hadn't carried a badge for 2 years, but some instincts never fade. And right now, every one of them was telling me that my daughter was in serious danger. Sleep didn't come easy that night. I kept seeing that bruise on Ember's arm, kept hearing Derek's threatening tone. By 4 in the morning, I gave up trying to rest and made coffee instead. The kitchen felt too quiet, too empty, filled with the weight of what I now knew I had to do. I'd been retired from the force for 2 years, but muscle memory dies hard. I found myself reaching for the notepad I used to carry, the one where I'd jot down details and observations, old habits, but maybe that's exactly what I needed right now. The truth was, I'd never liked Derek from the moment Ember brought him home. There was something about him that set my teeth on edge, the way he dominated conversations and always seemed to have an answer for everything. But Ember had been so happy, so convinced she'd found her perfect match, that I'd kept my reservations to myself. Now I was wondering if that had been the biggest mistake of my life. At 7:30, I called my old partner, Jim Rodriguez. He'd stayed on the force after I retired, making detective sergeant just last year. If anyone would understand what I was dealing with, it would be Jim. "Felix, you old dog," Jim's voice came through the phone, warm and familiar. "How's retirement treating you?" "Could be better, Jim. Listen, I need a favor. Unofficial." The tone of his voice shifted immediately. 26 years as partners will teach you to read each other's moods. "What's going on?" I told him about dinner, about the bruise, about Derek's reaction when I questioned it. Jim listened without interrupting, the way he always did when we were working a case. "You want me to run a background check," he said when I finished. "Everything you can find." Derek Matthews, 34 years old, works in real estate development. Married to my daughter 3 years ago. I paused. "Jim, I need to know if there's been any history of domestic incidents, any complaints filed, even if they were dropped. Give me until this afternoon, he said quietly. And Felix, be careful. If your gut's telling you something's wrong, it probably is. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the wall where Ember's high school graduation photo hung. She'd been 18, full of dreams and confidence, ready to take on the world. Where had that girl gone? Around noon, my phone rang. It was Ember. "Dad?" Her voice was small, uncertain. "About last night. I'm sorry Derek was so rude. He was just having a bad day at work." My heart clenched. She was making excuses for him, the same way victims always did. "Sweetheart, you don't need to apologize for someone else's behavior." "I know, but..." She paused, and I could picture her biting her lip the way she used to as a child when she was nervous. "I just don't want there to be tension in the family. Derek's really not a bad guy, Dad. He just gets stressed sometimes." Stressed. That's what she was calling it. "Ember, that bruise on your arm. I've seen injuries like that before, and they don't come from falling down steps." The silence stretched so long, I thought she might have hung up. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Dad, please don't. Please don't make this harder than it already is." Those words hit me like a physical blow. She'd just confirmed everything I'd feared without saying it outright. My daughter was being hurt, and she was protecting the person doing it. "Baby girl," I said, using this nickname I'd called her since she was 3 years old. "I'm not going anywhere. Whatever's happening, we'll figure it out together." "I have to go," she said quickly. "Derek's coming home for lunch." The line went dead. At 3:15, Jim called back. "Felix, you sitting down?" I wasn't, but I should have been. "What did you find?" "Derek Matthews has a record. Nothing major, but it's there. 2 domestic disturbance calls in his previous relationship, both about 4 years ago. Woman named Sandra Chen. She never pressed charges, but the reports are in the system." My grip tightened on the phone. "What kind of disturbances?" Neighbors called about loud arguing, sounds of things being thrown. Both times, responding officers noted that Ms. Chen had visible injuries, bruising on her arms and face. She claimed she'd fallen, said it was just a misunderstanding between her and her boyfriend. The pattern was there, clear as day. Derek had done this before. "There's more," Jim continued. "I made some calls. Sandra Chen moved to Oregon shortly after the second incident, but I tracked down her former neighbor, Mrs. Williams. She remembers Sandra well, says the girl was always jumpy, always apologizing for noise they could hear through the walls." I closed my eyes, feeling sick. Did Mrs. Williams ever see anything directly? Says she saw Sandra one morning getting her mail. Face was swollen, lips split. When Mrs. Williams asked if she needed help, Sandra claimed she'd walked into a door in the dark. Another lie, another excuse. The same script victims always followed. "Jim, I need you to do something else for me. Can you find out where Derek works, who his associates are? I want to know everything about this guy." "Already on it, Felix?" Jim's voice was serious. "This isn't something you can handle alone. If Derek's escalating with Ember the way he did with Sandra Chen, she could be in real danger." After Jim hung up, I sat in my living room, staring at nothing. My daughter was trapped in the same cycle that had destroyed so many women I'd encountered during my career. The isolation, the fear, the gradual erosion of self-worth that made victims believe they deserved what was happening to them. But Ember wasn't just another case. She was my child, the little girl who used to climb into my lap when thunderstorms scared her, who'd made me Father's Day cards with her small hands covered in glue and glitter. The woman who'd graduated summa cum laude from college, who'd once had dreams of traveling the world and starting her own business. Derek had systematically taken all of that away from her, and she didn't even see it happening. Around 5 o'clock, I made a decision that probably broke several laws and definitely violated Derek's privacy, but I was past caring about legal niceties. I drove to Ember's neighborhood and parked 3 houses down from theirs, positioned where I could see their driveway, but wouldn't be immediately visible from their windows. At 6:20, Derek's black BMW pulled in. I watched him get out of his car, noting the way he moved, confident, controlled, like a man who believed the world owed him something. He was wearing an expensive suit that probably cost more than some people made in a month. his dark hair perfectly styled despite the long workday. But it was what happened next that made my blood run cold. Through their front window, I could see Ember approach him as he entered the house. Even from a distance, her body language was apologetic, submissive. She reached toward him as if to help with his briefcase, and I saw Derek's hand shoot out, gripping her wrist. The gesture lasted only seconds, but I recognized it immediately. It wasn't affectionate, it was control, dominance disguised as a casual touch. Ember's head dropped, and she stepped back, creating distance between them. I sat in my car for another hour, watching their house, seeing the shadows move behind curtained windows. Once I thought I heard raised voices, but I couldn't be sure from this distance. When I finally drove home, my mind was racing with plans and possibilities. Derek Matthews thought he had all the power in this situation. He thought he was dealing with just another worried father who would eventually back down and mind his own business. He had no idea that he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. Because I wasn't just any father. I was a father who knew exactly how predators like him operated, who understood their weaknesses and vulnerabilities. And I was going to use every single thing I'd learned in 28 years of law enforcement to destroy him before he could destroy my daughter. Derek wanted to play games? Fine. But he was about to learn that some games have consequences he never saw coming. The next morning brought more information than I'd bargained for. Jim called at 8:30 with details that made my stomach turn. Felix, I dug deeper into Derek's background. The guy's got a pattern, and it's worse than we thought. Jim's voice was grim. Before Sandra Chen, there was another woman, Rebecca Torres. Same story, domestic disturbance calls, injuries that were explained away as accidents. I gripped the phone tighter. How many women, Jim? That we know of? 3, including Ember. But here's the thing that bothers me. Each relationship lasted longer than the previous one. Derek's getting better at this, more sophisticated in how he controls his victims. The clinical way Jim presented the facts couldn't mask the horror of what he was telling me. Derek wasn't just an abusive husband, he was a predator who had refined his methods with each victim. There's something else, Jim continued. Derek's co-workers describe him as charming but volatile. His boss mentioned that Derek has anger management issues, particularly when he doesn't get his way on projects. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen planning my next move. Confronting Derek directly was risky, but I needed to gauge exactly how dangerous he was. More importantly, I needed him to know that someone was watching. I knew Derek's routine now from my surveillance. He left for work at 7:45 sharp, returned for lunch at 12:30, and came home for the evening around 6:15. Today, I was going to interrupt that pattern. At 11:45, I drove to Derek's office building downtown. The lobby was marble and glass, all expensive surfaces designed to impress clients. I told the receptionist I was there to see Derek Matthews about a real estate matter. Do you have an appointment? She asked, fingers poised over her keyboard. No, but tell him Felix Brennan is here to discuss his wife's well-being. He'll see me. Her eyebrows rose slightly at the unusual message, but she made the call. Within 2 minutes, Derek appeared in the lobby, his face a mask of controlled fury. What the hell do you think you're doing? He hissed, steering me toward a quiet corner away from the receptionist. I looked at him calmly. We need to talk. About what? Your daughter's imaginary problems? His voice was low but venomous. I told you to stay out of our business. Funny thing about my business, I said, keeping my tone conversational. For 28 years, my business was protecting people from predators. Old habits die hard. Derek's face flushed red, but he forced a smile for the benefit of anyone watching. I don't know what you think you know, but you're way out of line here. I stepped closer, close enough that only he could hear me. I know about Sandra Chen. I know about Rebecca Torres. I know exactly what kind of man you are, Derek. For just a moment, his mask slipped. I saw something cold and calculating flash in his eyes, the real person behind the charm. Then the smile returned, but it never reached his eyes. Those women were unstable, he said quietly, just like Ember's becoming. Maybe it runs in families. The implication hit me like a slap. He was threatening my daughter's mental health, suggesting she was losing her grip on reality. It was a classic abuser tactic. Isolate the victim by making everyone else think she was the problem. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice deadly calm. "You're going to stop hurting my daughter. You're going to get help for your anger issues, or you're going to leave her alone. Those are your only options." Derek laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Or what? You'll call the police. With what evidence? Ember's never filed a complaint, never even admitted anything's wrong. It's just the paranoid delusions of an overprotective father who can't accept that his daughter chose someone else." He was right about the evidence, and we both knew it. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated how far I was willing to go to protect Ember. "You're right," I admitted. "I don't have enough evidence yet. But I'm patient, Derek. Patient and persistent. And I know exactly what to look for." Something flickered in his expression. Uncertainty, maybe even fear. "Stay away from us," he said, but his voice lacked conviction now. "I can't do that," I replied simply. "She's my daughter." I left him standing in that lobby, and I could feel his eyes burning into my back as I walked away. I'd accomplished what I'd come for. Derek now knew he was being watched. But I'd also escalated things, and that meant Ember was potentially in more danger. My phone rang as I was driving home. Ember's name flashed on the screen. "Dad?" Her voice was shaky, frightened. "Derek called. He said you came to his office, that you're trying to cause problems for him at work." My heart sank. Of course, Derek would turn this around on me, make me the villain in their story. "Sweetheart, I was trying to help. By embarrassing him in front of his colleagues? By making accusations?" Her voice was rising, panic clear in every word. "Dad, you don't understand. When Derek gets upset like this, things get difficult." The admission hung between us like a confession. She'd just told me exactly what I'd suspected, that Derek took his anger out on her. "Ember, listen to me. You don't have to protect him. You don't have to live like this." Like what? But her voice was hollow now, like she already knew the answer. In fear, walking on eggshells, making excuses for someone else's behavior. The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "I can't talk about this anymore, Dad. I can't. Please, please stay away from Derek, for my sake. Baby girl." "No, Dad, promise me. Promise you'll leave this alone." The desperation in her voice broke my heart. She was begging me to abandon her, to let her handle this situation that was clearly beyond her control. But what she didn't understand was that leaving her alone meant leaving her to be destroyed by a man who had already destroyed other women. "I promise I'll be careful," I said finally. It wasn't the promise she'd asked for, but it was the only one I could make. After she hung up, I sat in my driveway thinking about Derek's reaction to my visit. He'd been angry, yes, but there had been something else. Fear. He was afraid of exposure, afraid of losing the control he'd worked so hard to establish. That fear could make him more dangerous, more desperate. But it also meant he had something to lose, something he was trying to protect. And in my experience, desperate people made mistakes. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Back off, old man. This is your only warning." I stared at the message, feeling a familiar chill. Derek wasn't just angry anymore. He was threatening me directly, which meant I was right about him, and he knew it. But what worried me most wasn't Derek's threat against me. It was what he might do to Ember to punish me for interfering. Abusers often escalated when they felt their control slipping, and I'd just given him every reason to feel cornered. I looked at my house, at the quiet retirement I'd been enjoying just 48 hours ago. That life felt like it belonged to someone else now. There was no going back, no pretending I hadn't seen what I'd seen. Derek Matthews had made a critical error when he decided to hurt my daughter. He'd awakened something in me that had been dormant since my retirement. The relentless, methodical hunter who had built a career on bringing predators to justice. The game had changed, and Derek had no idea what he was really up against, but he was about to find out. I deleted his threatening text and went inside to make some phone calls. If Derek wanted to escalate this situation, I was ready. But this time, I wouldn't be fighting fair. 3 days after my confrontation with Derek, I called in a favor from someone I'd hoped never to contact again, Tommy Castellano, a private investigator who specialized in surveillance equipment. Tommy owed me from a case 5 years back when I'd helped clear his nephew of charges that could have destroyed the kid's future. Felix Brennan, Tommy's gravelly voice came through the phone. I heard you retired. What brings you back to the dark side? Family business, I said simply. I need surveillance equipment, small, undetectable, and completely legal. Tommy chuckled. Legal's my middle name these days. What kind of setup are we talking about? I explained what I needed without going into specifics. Within 2 hours, Tommy was at my house with a briefcase full of equipment that looked like something from a spy movie. These are voice-activated recording devices, he said, holding up what looked like ordinary household items, a pen, a small clock, even a decorative picture frame. Battery life of 72 hours, crystal clear audio quality, and this, he held up a device the size of a quarter, is a GPS tracker, magnetic, waterproof, and virtually undetectable. How do I access the recordings? Bluetooth connection to your phone. Everything saves to a secure cloud server, date and time stamped. Completely admissible in court if it comes to that. The mention of court made my stomach clench. I hoped it wouldn't come to that, but I had to be prepared for every possibility. There's something else, Tommy said, his expression growing serious. Jim Rodriguez called me, told me this is about your daughter. Felix, I've been doing this for 15 years and domestic cases are the worst. These guys, they're unpredictable when they feel cornered. I nodded. I know the risks. Do you? Because if this Derek finds out you're surveilling him, he might take it out on her. The thought had been keeping me awake at night. Every action I took could potentially make things worse for Ember, but doing nothing would definitely make things worse. What would you do if it was your daughter? I asked. Tommy was quiet for a long moment. I'd probably do exactly what you're doing. Just be smart about it. That afternoon, I put phase 1 of my plan into motion. I called Ember and asked if I could take her to lunch to apologize for the scene at Derek's office. I was out of line, I said, hating how easily the lie came. I just worry about you, but that's no excuse for interfering in your marriage. Ember was quiet for a moment. Derek was really upset, Dad. He thinks you don't respect him. Maybe I can make it right. Let me buy you lunch, and you can help me figure out how to smooth things over. She agreed to meet me at a cafe downtown, away from her neighborhood where Derek might see us together. When she walked in, I had to grip my coffee cup to keep from reacting. There were faint bruises around her wrists that she'd tried to cover with makeup, and she moved carefully, like someone nursing invisible injuries. You look tired, sweetheart, I said as she sat down. Just haven't been sleeping well, she replied, not meeting my eyes. Work's been stressful. We ordered lunch, making small talk about safe topics. But I was studying her, cataloging every subtle sign of the trauma she was hiding. The way she startled when the server approached from behind. How she checked her phone constantly, as if monitoring Derek's messages. The apologetic way she spoke, as if everything was somehow her fault. Ember, I said carefully, I want you to know that no matter what happens, no matter what anyone tells you, I love you unconditionally. You could never do anything that would change that. Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I thought she might break down and tell me everything. Instead, she wiped her eyes and forced a smile. I know, Dad. I love you too. And I want you to know that if you ever need help with anything at all, I'm here, day or night. She nodded, but I could see the walls going back up, the practice distance that Derek had probably trained her to maintain with anyone who might interfere. After lunch, I walked her to her car. As she was getting in, I hugged her goodbye and slipped one of Tommy's recording devices into her purse, a pen that looked identical to the one she always carried for work. Take care of yourself, I said, meaning it more than she could possibly know. That evening, I began phase 2. I drove to Derek's neighborhood and positioned myself where I could observe their house. At 6:20, Derek's BMW pulled into the driveway. Through the front window, I watched the same scene I'd witnessed before, Ember approaching him apologetically, Derek's aggressive body language, her immediate retreat. But this time, I had a recorder in the house. Around 8 o'clock, my phone buzzed with an audio notification from the surveillance app. I put in my earpiece and listened to the playback, my blood pressure rising with every word. Derek's voice came through clearly. Where did you go for lunch today? Just to that cafe on Main Street. I told you I was meeting Dad. For 2 hours? What did you talk about for 2 hours? Ember's voice was smaller, defensive. Nothing important. He wanted to apologize for coming to your office. And you believed him? Ember, your father is trying to destroy our marriage. He's filling your head with lies about me. He didn't say anything about you, Derek. We just talked about work, and the sound of something slamming, a door, maybe a cabinet, made me flinch. Then Derek's voice, much closer to the microphone now, low and menacing. Don't lie to me. I can tell when you're lying. Did he ask you about our private business? About our personal life? No, I swear. Derek, please. You're scaring me. I'm scaring you? Your father shows up at my workplace, embarrasses me in front of my colleagues, threatens my career, and I'm the one scaring you? There was a sound I couldn't identify. Then Ember's voice, higher now, frightened. Derek, stop. You're hurting me. I'm barely touching you. God, you're so dramatic. Just like your father said, unstable. The recording continued for several more minutes. Derek systematically breaking down Ember's confidence, making her question her own perceptions, isolating her from me by painting my concern as manipulation. I sat in my car, listening to my daughter being psychologically tortured, and I had to grip the steering wheel to keep from marching up to their front door. But the recording had given me something valuable, concrete evidence of Derek's controlling behavior and his admission that he was physically hurting her. It wasn't enough for criminal charges, but it was a start. Over the next week, I collected more recordings. Derek berating Ember for imaginary mistakes, him questioning her about every phone call, every interaction with co-workers, every minute she wasn't under his direct supervision. The gradual erosion of her spirit was documented in heartbreaking detail. But it was the recording from the following Tuesday that changed everything. I was at home when the audio notification came through. This time the conversation was different. Derek was speaking to someone else, a male voice I didn't recognize. She's becoming a problem, Derek said. Her father's sniffing around asking questions. What kind of questions? The other voice asked. The kind that could cause trouble. I think he knows about Sandra and Rebecca. My blood went cold. Derek was discussing his previous victims with someone, acknowledging that there had been others. Maybe it's time to move on, the unknown voice suggested. Clean slate, new location. I'm not running from some washed-up cop, Derek replied. Besides, Ember's got assets. Her inheritance from her grandmother, the trust fund. I'm not walking away from that kind of money. So that was it. Derek wasn't just controlling Ember for psychological satisfaction. He was after her money. Ember had inherited a substantial trust fund when her grandmother passed away 2 years ago, money that Derek could only access if they stayed married. What about the father? The voice asked. Derek's laugh was cold. Old men have accidents all the time. Heart attacks, falls downstairs, retirement can be dangerous. The threat against my life was clear and unmistakable. But more than that, Derek had just revealed his ultimate plan, to keep Ember trapped until he could access her inheritance, then dispose of anyone who might interfere. I saved the recording immediately and called Jim. We need to meet, I said when he answered. Tonight. And Jim? Bring backup. This thing is about to get very dangerous. As I waited for Jim to arrive, I stared at the photo of Ember on my kitchen wall. She was smiling in that picture, taken just a year before she met Derek. Young, confident, full of life. Derek Matthews had tried to destroy that woman, the way he'd destroyed Sandra Chen and Rebecca Torres. But he'd made one crucial error in his calculations. He'd threatened the wrong father. Jim arrived at my house with Detective Sarah Martinez, someone I'd worked with on domestic violence cases during my final years on the force. Their faces were grim as they listened to the recordings I'd collected over the past week. This is enough for us to bring Derek in for questioning, Jim said after hearing Derek's threat against my life. The implied violence against Ember, the admission about previous victims, the direct threat against you. We have probable cause. But Sarah shook her head. It's good evidence, but Derek's smart. He'll lawyer up immediately, claim the recordings were taken illegally, and without Ember's cooperation, a lot of this becomes circumstantial. She was right, and we all knew it. Domestic violence cases were notoriously difficult to prosecute when the victim wouldn't testify. and Derek had spent 3 years conditioning Ember to protect him. What if we could get him to confess directly? I asked. What if he thought he was in control of the situation? Jim raised an eyebrow. What are you thinking, Felix? Derek threatened me because he sees me as the biggest obstacle to his plan. What if I give him an opportunity to act on that threat? But we're ready for him. Sarah leaned forward. You want to use yourself as bait. Derek's getting desperate. He knows I'm watching, and he can't access Ember's trust fund while I'm interfering. If I can get him to make a move against me with you as backup, we'll have him on attempted assault at minimum. It's risky, Jim said. These guys are unpredictable when they're cornered. Or me. More risky than leaving my daughter with him, I asked. After an hour of planning, we had our strategy. I would call Derek and arrange to meet him somewhere isolated, supposedly to negotiate some kind of truce. Jim and Sarah would be positioned nearby with backup units ready to move. But first, we needed to ensure Ember's safety. If Derek suspected a setup, he might take his anger out on her. I'll handle that, Sarah said. We'll have a patrol car do wellness checks on the house, make it look routine, but ensure she's safe. The next morning, I made the call. Derek answered on the second ring, his voice wary. What do you want, Felix? To talk, just you and me. I think we got off on the wrong foot. There was a long pause. Why would I want to talk to you? Because I have information about Ember's trust fund that you need to hear. Information about how the inheritance laws work in this state. I could practically hear Derek's greed overriding his caution. What kind of information? The kind that affects your financial future. Meet me tonight at the old warehouse district on Riverside, Building 12. Come alone. Why there? Because I don't want Ember to see us together until we've worked things out. She's been through enough stress. Derek was quiet for so long I thought he might refuse. Then, 8 o'clock. And Felix, don't try anything stupid. The line went dead. At 6:30 that evening, Jim, Sarah, and 2 backup units took their positions around the abandoned warehouse. I wore a wire and carried my service weapon. Retired or not, I still had a concealed carry permit. Derek arrived exactly on time, his BMW pulling into the empty lot like a predator stalking prey. He got out slowly, scanning the area for any signs of ambush. Satisfied that I was alone, he walked toward the building entrance, where I was waiting. You're punctual, I said as he approached. Let's get this over with, Derek replied, his voice tense. What's this information about Ember's trust fund? I stepped back into the shadows of the building, drawing him away from the street where he might be seen. It's about the inheritance laws, specifically what happens to a spouse's access to trust funds when there's evidence of domestic violence. Derek's expression changed instantly, suspicion replacing greed. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that if Ember divorces you for cause and domestic violence qualifies, you won't see a penny of her grandmother's money. His hand moved inside his jacket, and every instinct from my police training kicked in. Careful, Derek, I'm not alone out here. Yes, you are, he said, his voice taking on that cold quality I'd heard in the recordings. Just like you're going to be permanently alone after tonight. He pulled out a gun, a small caliber pistol that he held with the confidence of someone who knew how to use it. You should have minded your own business, old man, Derek said, taking a step closer. Ember was fine before you started filling her head with lies. Was Sandra Chen fine too? What about Rebecca Torres? Derek's face twisted with rage. Those women were weak. They couldn't appreciate what I offered them. But Ember's different. Or she was, until you poisoned her against me. I didn't poison her against you, Derek. You did that yourself every time you put your hands on her. I never seriously hurt her, Derek snapped, the admission spilling out in his anger. A few bruises, some discipline when she got out of line. That's not abuse. That's marriage. His voice was rising now, echoing in the empty warehouse, perfect for the wire I was wearing. Just like it was marriage when you threatened to kill me if I didn't stop interfering? Derek's laugh was bitter. You think you're so smart, don't you? Recording our conversations, gathering your little evidence. None of that matters now. He raised the gun, pointing it directly at my chest. You're going to have a heart attack, Felix. The stress of retirement, the worry about your daughter. It was too much for your old heart. And after I'm gone? Ember will grieve, of course, But she'll realize that you were the problem all along, that I was just protecting our marriage from your interference." Derek's finger moved to the trigger, and I could see the exact moment he made the decision to pull it. But before he could complete the motion, Sarah's voice cut through the darkness. "Police! Drop your weapon!" Derek spun around, startled by the sudden appearance of armed officers from multiple directions. His gun swung wildly as he tried to process what was happening. "It's over, Derek," I said calmly. "We heard everything. The confession about Sandra and Rebecca, the admission that you've been hurting Ember, the threat against my life. It's all recorded." For a moment, Derek looked like he might try to shoot his way out. His eyes darted between the officers, calculating odds that didn't exist. Then his shoulders slumped, and the fight went out of him all at once. "This is entrapment," he said weakly as Jim cuffed him. "No," Sarah replied, reading him his rights. "This is justice. It's der." As they led Derek away, he looked back at me one last time. "You think you've saved her? Ember will never forgive you for this. She'll never believe she needed saving." His words hit harder than I wanted to admit, because there was truth in them. Ember had been conditioned to see Derek as her protector, me as the threat to her happiness. Arresting Derek was only the first step. Helping Ember heal from years of psychological manipulation would be much harder. But as I watched Derek's BMW being impounded as evidence, I felt something I hadn't experienced in days. Hope. My daughter was safe. For the first time in 3 years, Derek Matthews couldn't hurt her. Now came the hardest part, helping Ember understand that she was finally free. The drive to Ember's house felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. Jim had called ahead to have officers escort Derek's belongings from the house, and Sarah was already there explaining the situation to Ember. I could only imagine how she was reacting to the news that her husband had been arrested for threatening to kill her father. In her mind, this would probably confirm every terrible thing Derek had said about me interfering in their marriage. But I had to face her, had to try to help her see the truth about what Derek had been doing to her. As I pulled into her driveway, I could see Sarah's patrol car and another vehicle I didn't recognize. Through the front window, I saw Ember sitting on her couch, her face in her hands. This was going to be the hardest conversation of my life, but it was also the most important one. My daughter was finally safe, but she didn't know it yet, and it was going to take everything I had to help her understand that the nightmare was really over. Walking through Ember's front door that night was like entering a war zone. My daughter sat curled in the corner of her couch, arms wrapped around her knees, staring at nothing. Sarah was in the kitchen making tea, and a woman I didn't recognize sat in the chair across from Ember, speaking in low, gentle tones. "This is Dr. Lisa Chen," Sarah said as I entered. "She's a crisis counselor who specializes in domestic violence cases." Ember looked up at me, and the pain in her eyes nearly brought me to my knees. But it wasn't the pain of someone who'd been rescued. It was the anguish of someone who believed her world had just been destroyed. "How could you do this to me?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "How could you have Derek arrested? He was just trying to protect our marriage from your interference." I sat down slowly, keeping my distance so she wouldn't feel cornered. "Sweetheart, Derek wasn't protecting anything. He was controlling you, hurting you." "He never hurt me," Ember's voice rose, defensive and panicked. "Those bruises, that was just... I really did fall. I really am clumsy. Derek was always patient with me, always helped me when I messed up." Dr. Chen leaned forward gently. "Ember, it's normal to feel confused right now. When we've been in a controlling relationship, our perspective on what's normal can become distorted." "There's nothing distorted about my perspective," Ember snapped. "My father has always disapproved of Derek, and now he's found a way to destroy my marriage." I pulled out my phone and opened the surveillance app. "Ember, I need you to listen to something. It's a recording from your house last week." Her eyes widened with betrayal. "You recorded us? You spied on me?" "I recorded Derek," I said firmly, "because I knew you were in danger." "Gee." I played back the conversation where Derek had berated her for having lunch with me, where he'd admitted to hurting her, where he'd called her unstable and dramatic. Ember's face went white as she listened to her husband's voice, cold and controlling, nothing like the loving man she remembered. "He was just upset," she said weakly when the recording ended. "You ambushed him at work, embarrassed him. People say things they don't mean when they're angry." "Do they threaten to kill people when they're angry?" I asked quietly, then played the recording of Derek's conversation with his unknown associate, including the threat against my life and the admission that he'd done this to other women. The silence that followed was deafening. Ember stared at the phone in my hands like it contained something impossible to comprehend. "That's not... he wouldn't..." she began, then stopped, her breathing becoming shallow and rapid. Dr. Chen moved to sit beside her. "Ember, what you're feeling right now is completely normal. When someone we love has been manipulating us, learning the truth can feel like the ground is disappearing beneath our feet." "But I love him," Ember whispered, tears streaming down her face. "And he loves me. He tells me every day how much he loves me." "Love doesn't hurt people," I said gently. "Love doesn't isolate you from your family, doesn't make you afraid to speak freely, doesn't leave bruises on your arms." Ember looked down at her wrists, at the fading marks she'd been covering with makeup. For the first time, I saw recognition flickering in her eyes. I thought it was normal," she said slowly. "Derek said all couples argue, that marriage requires compromise. He said I was too sensitive, that I made mountains out of molehills. That's what abusers do," Dr. Chen explained. "They redefine reality for their victims. They make you question your own perceptions, your own worth." Over the next hour, Dr. Chen gently guided Ember through the pattern of Derek's behavior. The isolation from friends and family, the constant criticism disguised as concern, the way he made her feel responsible for his emotions and actions. "He convinced me that Dad disapproved of our marriage because he was jealous," Ember said, looking at me with dawning comprehension. "He said you couldn't stand to see me happy with someone else. The only thing I couldn't stand was seeing you unhappy," I replied, "seeing you lose yourself in that relationship." Sarah had been quietly organizing Derek's belongings for removal when she called me over to the kitchen. "Felix, you need to see this." She'd found Derek's laptop, and on the screen was a folder titled Insurance Policies. Inside were dozens of photos, pictures of Ember's injuries over the past 3 years, carefully documented and dated. But these weren't photos of accidental bruises. They showed a clear pattern of escalating violence. "He was keeping evidence of what he did to her," Sarah said grimly, "probably as leverage in case she ever tried to leave him." My hands shook as I looked through the images. My beautiful daughter marked by violence again and again, each photo a testament to Derek's systematic cruelty. "There's more," Sarah continued, opening another folder. "Financial records. Derek's been slowly transferring money from Ember's accounts into offshore accounts. He was planning to clean her out and disappear." The full scope of Derek's manipulation was staggering. He hadn't just been abusing Ember physically and emotionally. He'd been systematically stealing from her, planning to leave her broken when he was done with her. I returned to the living room where Dr. Chen was still working with Ember, helping her process the reality of her situation. "Ember," I said gently, "there's something else you need to know." I showed her the financial records, explained how Derek had been stealing from her trust fund, how he'd planned to disappear once he'd taken everything she had. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place for her then. She saw Derek not as the loving husband who'd been driven to desperation by an interfering father, but as the calculating predator who'd targeted her from the beginning. "3 years, she whispered. 3 years of my life. 3 years that are over now," I said firmly. "You're safe, you're free, and you're going to heal from this." Dr. Chen gave us information about support groups, therapy resources, and legal aid for domestic violence survivors. She explained that recovery would be a process, that Ember might experience conflicting emotions about Derek for some time. "It's normal to mourn the person you thought he was," she told Ember. "Grief is part of healing." As the evening wore on, Ember gradually began to open up about the reality of her marriage. The walking on eggshells, the constant apologizing, the way she'd learned to anticipate Derek's moods and adjust her behavior accordingly. "I stopped seeing my friends because Derek said they were bad influences," she admitted. "I quit the book club I loved because he said it was a waste of time. I even changed jobs because he didn't like my old boss. Ostos. Each revelation was another piece of her identity that Derek had systematically stripped away, another part of herself that she could now reclaim. At midnight, Sarah and Dr. Chen finally left, but not before ensuring Ember had 24-hour support numbers and a safety plan in case Derek somehow made bail. Ember and I sat in her living room, surrounded by the remnants of a life that had been built on lies and control. "I'm sorry, Dad," she said quietly. "I'm sorry I didn't see it." "I'm sorry I pushed you away." "You have nothing to apologize for," I replied, moving to sit beside her on the couch. Derek was an expert at manipulation. He targeted you specifically because you're loving and trusting. "How did you know?" she asked. "How did you see what I couldn't?" "Because I've seen men like Derek before, and because I know who you really are. The strong, confident woman you used to be didn't just disappear. Derek spent 3 years convincing you she never existed." Ember leaned against my shoulder, and for the first time in years, she felt like my daughter again. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you heal. Now you remember who you are. Now you take back everything Derek tried to take from you." 3 months later, Ember moved into a small apartment closer to my house. Derek had pled guilty to charges of domestic violence, financial fraud, and making terrorist threats, earning himself a 5-year prison sentence. Ember was in therapy twice a week and had joined a support group for domestic violence survivors. She'd reconnected with old friends, returned to the book club she'd loved, and was slowly rebuilding the life Derek had tried to erase. The healing wasn't linear. Some days were harder than others. Sometimes Ember still caught herself apologizing for things that weren't her fault or seeking permission for decisions that were entirely her own. But each day, she grew a little stronger, a little more like the person she'd been before Derek. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, she came over to help me work in my garden, something we used to do together when she was young. "Dad," she said as we planted new roses, "thank you for not giving up on me, even when I gave up on myself." I looked at my daughter, dirt on her hands and joy returning to her eyes, and felt a peace I hadn't experienced in years. "I will never give up on you," I told her. "That's what real love looks like." Ember smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in 3 years. "I'm learning that," she said. "I'm finally learning what real love looks like." As we worked together in the garden, planting new life in rich soil, I knew that Derek Matthews had lost more than his freedom. He'd lost the chance to destroy something beautiful, something resilient, something that was stronger than his cruelty. My daughter was free, and she was going to be just fine.